Okay, I'm a Christmas person. For those of you who know me, you should know that by now. I've been here 5 years. If you don't know me that well, I'm a Christmas person. I'm one of those people, as my husband can attest, who starts listening to Christmas music before Thanksgiving. I'm writing Christmas cards, a lot of Christmas cards, and St. Nicholas cards. I'm thinking about gifts. I'm thinking about what I'm going to cook. I make my lists. I do all the things. I love Christmas. And then Advent comes along with its initial focus not on the birth of Jesus, but on the end of the world, on the end times when Christ will return. For those of you who preach the common lectionary, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I always kind of catch my breath at the beginning of Advent because I feel that kind of dissonance. I'm ready to party, and the scriptures are saying, whoop, 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 wait a second. In some ways, it's a very foreboding note on which to begin the holiday season. And we certainly hear it echoed in the readings that we heard this morning, talking about God's wrath and fear of the Lord and fear of God. This is the theme of the first 2 weeks in the Common Lectionary for Advent. It's only in weeks 3 and 4 that the attention turns to the actual remembering of the birth of Christ. But this year, actually, I'm kind of ready to hear some warnings in our readings. Those warnings going out to kings and rulers. We could add the queens too. I think we could add the presidents. We could add the governors. We could add the lieutenant governors. I think we could include all of them, all of the political leaders. God is putting them on notice. God is watching. And God will hold them accountable for how they will treat those in need and treat the people in their care. Two of the readings remind us that these political figures that God has brought the powerful from their thrones before. It is a warning sign. And I want to say, when I hear all this, you go, God. Let them have your wrath. Put them on notice. Hold them accountable. Remind them why they should fear you. This year, I'm ready to hear it. What about you? Are you ready to hear it? The thing is, when my enthusiasm quiets, I realize that the message isn't just for the politicians being put on notice, but it's also about me. And it's about us as a group, as a community. There are no bystanders. No one's free from these warnings. And all of this has made me ask myself, do I have fear of the Lord in me? And if so, what does it look like? What about you? Do you have fear of the Lord in you? What does it look like in you? From what I understand, fear of the Lord or fear of God from a biblical perspective, you'll have to check with the Bible people if I'm correct about this, but comes either by one of two paths, either generated by some amazing act of God, so think of the appearance in the burning bush, or think of God becoming human, amazing acts that stun us, bring us awe, and generate a kind of fear, or fear of God that's generated by acknowledging the fact that God is indeed watching us and judging us. Now, in my mind, these two paths sort of reinforce each other. They probably are better seen together than they are separate. Knowing that God can do amazing things reminds me just how powerful God is, which can encourage my gratitude to God. But it also can generate a desire not to disappoint this powerful God, who is also my maker. I also think they must go together to have a healthy fear of God. God's judgment, in some ways, is complemented by God's power, God's beauty, God's compassion. So let me be clear. What I'm saying is, I don't think fear of the Lord is intended to paralyze us. Its function really is to ensure that we have our priorities in order. It forces us to ask ourselves, are we in line or are we serving God's transformation of the world? That's what it encourages us to do. Now, when I think about my own formation, my early formation as a Christian, in church specifically, fear of God was certainly introduced, and it was encouraged. But the sad truth is that it was mostly centered around sexual purity. I mean, there was far more concern about whether we were sexually active than they were worried about whether we were actively following the commands of Jesus to care for those in need. I won't go into all the details, but I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. This obsession with sexual purity and sexual activity, all the meantime, people in need being ignored. Your formation might have been different, so I'm not suggesting that my formation is your formation. But I wonder, what were you taught that God was paying attention to? And maybe what do you think about that now? The Lucan Jesus that we hear from, or from the gospel today, is pretty clear about what God's priority is. It's caring for those who live in poverty, caring for those in need, and asking us whether we're willing to use our power to make their lives better. Luke is very clear on this. There's not really any debate. And if we plan to call ourselves followers of Jesus, the work before us is pretty clear. I don't think we can pretend that we don't know or we don't understand. We might not know exactly how to do it all the time, but the command is actually quite clear. And when I think about all that and kind of step back as my role as president of the seminary and think about our community, it actually gives me a great deal of hope that CTS as a community demonstrates its fear of the Lord every day. We can see it when our interns and our residents make therapy available to those in need regardless of their financial situation. We see it when we empower individuals and communities of faith in our Faith in Action project to take direct action to disable the forces that push people into poverty. We see it when the seminary joins forces with others in the community to inspire police reform so that people's lives can be safer on the street and in our neighborhood. We see it when the seminary collaborates with other organizations to find concrete solutions to our housing crisis in Indianapolis, including calling our mayor to accountability. We see it when the seminary makes a commitment to our trans and non-binary youth and adults in the face of increasing discrimination. We see it when we teach our theology students how to practice Christianity without being anti-Semitic or condemning of other religions. We see it when we lift up the beauty and gifts of African American preaching and ministry, which have often been historically ignored and ridiculed. I believe CTS knows God is watching us. That said, my friends, as we enter into a new year, there will be many, many more opportunities to remind our political leaders that God is putting them on notice, which is not a very easy thing to do. And we will have to remind ourselves that God has put us on notice too. We have more work to do as individuals and as a community. The Christ child that we are about to celebrate and should came to transform the world and its ways. And according to the CTS mission statement, we actually prepare followers of Christ to serve the transformation that God is doing. For those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, our commitments are about to be tested in significant and life-changing ways as new political administrations take their seats. Religion, and Christianity in particular, will be used increasingly as a weapon to diminish, exclude, and alienate people who are often already socially vulnerable. We must become more vocal and more active in resisting this trend. It is good. It is actually, I think, essential to be part of a community where we are not alone in the struggle to be faithful followers of Jesus. We can remind each other and the community as a whole that God, the God who so loved the world that she came to dwell among us in human form, seeks to make human flourishing possible for all. The God who has clear expectations for us has also committed herself to be with us. We are not alone. And as the Advent season turns its attention in weeks 3 and 4 to remembering the birth of Christ, we must rejoice and celebrate this good news. Friends of God, may all our Advent and Christmas reflections and celebrations strengthen the bonds among us, prepare us to rejoice in the birth of Christ, and prepare us for the return of Christ in all the days until then. God is counting on us. Thanks be to God.